Testing. Hello. Hello, hello. Let's get an audio balancing check real quick. Audio balanced. Is this audio
March is
balanced?
my month of Marx, and in this part one, we'll
Can
be
you
looking
hear
at
me? Can you
labour
hear me?
and
Can you hear me?
class. So we're
All right. I'm gonna check that real quick. Um. Da, 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 da. Sorry, everybody. Just give me a second. I don't know why I'm saying sorry, everybody. Nobody's here yet, so. Okay, so I checked the audio balancing. Maybe it could be a bit louder. Not really sure. Let me try to up the volume just a little bit for the desktop. All right. Hmm. Let me just advertise my shit. Let's find a good. Excuse me. I don't know how long this stream is gonna go. Probably not super long, just because I don't know. I'm just doing this because I'm bored. Really feels like easy content. Uh, okay. Just want to make sure chat is working. Okay, yep, it's working. Also, I got a new microphone, so hopefully I won't be having the audio issues I was having last time or the time before that. Actually, no, it was the time before that because the last thing I did was the reading of Politics as a Vocation. So, all right, let's just get started now. Let's just get started. I'll let people filter their way in. Okay, so this is going to be labor and class conflict apparently. Oh, also, as always, uh, you're getting some sweet Minesweeper content alongside. Uh, this is for it's mostly for me actually, because otherwise I would probably not be able to sit through this. But yep. Anyway, let's keep going.
March is my month of Marx, and in this part one, we'll be looking at labour and class. So we're talking about production, making products. And in order to make any product, you first need two things. You'll need the means of production. This video is like a product which I made, and I can show you some of my means of production right now. It's
Sure. Yeah. Okay. The video is a product.
my camera, my microphone, my tripod, lighting, the backboards I've got in my little studio here, and of course the talent as well as the editing software and so on.
Okay, well that's a little confusing. I guess like the talent. Okay. As in like yourself? It's I would say okay, maybe that's just I'm gonna nitpick that to all hell. It's probably not super important, but I would say it's more like that her labor power is an input into the production, right? Not herself. Though I don't know, that's just a weird point, but sure.
All of these things I own, but that only gets me a video. In order to get a YouTube video, I need YouTube, the website. That's the most important means of production for me, and it
Okay. Nope. No, 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 no. The- YouTube is not YouTube is not a means of production. Okay, I see. So, okay, I've watched this video before, like a very long time ago, and like somewhat recently. So I think what she's going to be trying to claim here is basically like this analogy basically places her as somebody who doesn't own her own means of production. But manifestly, that's not true, right? She does own her own means of production. YouTube is not part of her means of production in the same way that like the grocery store, the grocery store doesn't sell all of its own products, right? So fucking Coca-Cola, right? Coca-Cola is sold at grocery stores that Coca-Cola doesn't own. But that doesn't mean that the grocery store is part of Coca-Cola's means of production. You know, it's not at all. The means of it's a means of distribution. It is like the place where, the market is happening, but it's not a means of production. So no, no, you are not let's see where she goes with this.
it's not owned by me, but by Google. This means that making YouTube videos is what Karl Marx called capitalistic production, where the means of production are privately owned rather than owned by the laborers, and the products
It what? Sure, but no, because like it's not rather than. It's not rather than. It could be owned by the laborers. It just isn't on the whole. Like it's the private ownership in specific. It could be privately owned by the laborers, and it would still be capitalistic production. You know, it's not capitalistic just because the laborers own it, right? If you still have the property relation there, it is still like capitalistic. And that's why artisans can still make stuff within capitalism, because even though they own their own means of production, they still they own it for themselves. So they are the laborer and they are the means and they own the means of production. Try to wish you well, but chat not working. Oh, it's working. I can see you. I can see you. I don't know why it wasn't working before. That's a bit strange. Yeah. But yeah, anyway, point being, no, you're you're not a proletariat philosophy too. Not even at this point were you a proletariat. You are a you are a you are part of the petty bourgeois because you own your own means of production. YouTube is not a means of production. It's a means of distribution at most.
are sold in a market for profit. In this case, Google sells ad space on my videos. The second thing you'll need is labor, and labor for Marx is real.
Okay, so hold on. I mean, yes. Okay. I hate this example because it's way too complicated for an explainer video, right? Because you're not really selling a product. Like you're making a product, but as you say, Google is selling ad space, not the product itself. So it's a little outside really of what Marx was even accustomed to. So I think it's like I can't say that I have like the definitive answer of how advertising should be analyzed through Marx, but it's definitely more complicated than this video is making it out to be.
Really important because it's the only thing that can increase the value of what you have. If you buy a block of wood and do nothing with it, then its value will remain constant. But if you labor to carve that wood into a chair, you will increase its value. Now, you could try and rip somebody off and sell the wood for more than it's worth, and supply and demand will come into it, but those things will only affect its price, which for Marx is not the same thing.
Okay, that seems correct to me. Like labor, yes, I think that's correct. Unless I'm missing something subtle, it seems broadly correct that she's right that price and value are not the same thing. Um, though I wouldn't say that it's ripping someone off if you sell it for a higher price than its value. That's not really something Marx would say, but it's broadly that I would say that's broadly correct. I'm not gonna nitpick that one.
He thought that prices would generally be proportional to value, but value he thought was definitionally how much labor it takes to make something under normal circumstances.
No, that is not okay. That's wrong because value is not definitionally this. It's not a. It's what Marx is doing is not providing a definition of value. He isn't stipulating that value is this, and then um and then working from there. He's providing an analysis of how more value can be created um basically an analysis of profit. Like how is it that profit can be made when it seems on the surface as if things are being traded in exact proportion to one another. Like what is the mechanism by which that happens, right? It's not a definition. Like he provides an argument for why labor is this thing uh that underlies exchange. It's not, again, not a definition. It's not stipulative. It's an argument.
Labour is measured in time, hours, and minutes. The more labour it takes to make something under normal conditions, the more valuable it is. That's why, if you can automate a process, then the products become cheaper, because it now takes less labour to make them. If you've got a job needs doing that takes a lot of special training, then it becomes more expensive, because the time spent training is necessary labour for doing the job. Time is money, literally. This is called the labour.
Mm, time is part of. No, time is not money. Money is the medium of exchange, but whatever. That's just a quip. I'm not gonna fucking whatever. I'm trying not to nitpick because I know that I could say a million things about the way that I wish she would phrase things, but I recognize that this is not for that purpose. And I'm gonna try my best to stick to real criticisms and not nitpicky ones. But
Theory of time is money, literally. This is called the labour theory of value.
no, it is not called, not in Marx, it's not. At the at the most he would call it like the law of value, perhaps. But even more specifically, it's the determination of value by socially necessary labor time. It's not the labor theory of value. The labor theory of value is something that, like, people say now that is anachronistic, I would say. It's not really what Marx said about his own theory.
The normal conditions caveat is important here. If you slack off and it takes you 2 hours to do something that would normally only take one, well, then the value of the product doesn't double. It stays the same because under normal conditions it would only take 1 hour to make that. Similarly, if you work really, really hard and get the job done in 30 minutes, the value of the product doesn't halve. Now, the labour theory of value is, at this moment in history, unorthodox. Mainstream economics prefers a theory of value called marginalism. Marginalists say that the labour theory breaks down in certain circumstances. Marxists and post-Marxists say that actually it's marginalism that breaks down in the right circumstances. So just bear in mind as we go here that a lot of this is very hotly debated, and as we'll be seeing later in the series, there's a lot riding on it.
Yeah, I would say there's something riding on it, though I don't know that you need strict determination as much as you need the component of labor and capital. Like, I think you can derive a lot of Marxist conclusions without necessarily saying that labor is determinant of the magnitude of value, though I do think you kind of need it to be the source of some of it, or at least the apparent source, yeah, or the source, like the thing that transforms one use value into another and allows uh and allows for the extraction of surplus. It doesn't necessarily need to be exact, but I do think you need that much.
Exactly value becomes price is one of the big talking points, though some economists prefer to just ignore value altogether and just focus on prices, since you can model an economy and find out how to make that mad dollar just by looking at something's price. Value brings with it a whole bunch of questions about fairness and.
No, it doesn't. Value does not bring into consideration fairness. There is no there is no unfairness in Marx's theory. Marx does not say that it is unfair. Um, selling your labor power is not unfair to Marx. Nothing about this is unfair. It is not a question of fairness at all. And I'm sorry, I'm waffling a little bit because I want to try to explain why it's not about fairness. Just say her. Just say her. I get that it's hard, but it's her. Anyway, how do I explain like why it's not about fairness? Like the value is not a moral consideration for Marx. Um, it was for other political economists at the time. So for Smith, for example, like Adam Smith, it was the case that um, value or natural price was like something moral. Like it's what the product should cost in like in a normative sense. Marx doesn't take that line. Um, Value here is not it's not about like because I imagine like let's see what she says about this real
whether
quick.
looking at something's price. Value brings with it a whole bunch of questions about fairness and whether the price is right, and mainstream economics often prefers to just gloss over those issues.
Yeah, so no, that's not what Marx was doing at all. Marx was not talking about whether or not the price was correct or fair, whether or not it was proportional to the value, the value in Marx is not it's serving a purpose to explain prices, but it's not that like if prices differ from value, there's something unfair about that. Hmm. He wasn't prescribing that values should come to price. Again, Smith did that. Smith, I think, definitely believed in that kind of normativity, but Marx did not. He was, and the question of normativity in Marx is much more complex, but in this case, it's just straightforwardly he didn't talk about the fairness of a price at all.
The other big talking point is the so-called great contradiction. If labour is the source of value, then why aren't the most valuable products made in the most labour-intensive industries? Some people think that this completely scuppers the labour theory. There might be ways of getting around it, but we don't need to worry about that. I'm just making sure you know where we are on the theoretical map.
I guess. I've never heard that called the great contradiction. Um, it's also not clear to me if that doesn't hold. Like, it's kind of hard to. I don't know. I've never heard that called the great contradiction, so I don't know what to say about it.
Labour power, the ability to labour, is in Marxist economics the most important commodity in the world. It's the
Hello, Shakespeare. Um, so yeah.
only commodity that, when applied, increases the value of what you have. Labour power is found
Yeah.
only in.
So that's correct. That I think that's all correct, unless I'm missing something like subtle. Yeah, labor power is the only commodity which, when applied, will increase or will lead to a surplus of value. So it's the value, its use value is in the creation of more value, which is unique to labor power in Marx.
People and increases the value of what you have. Labour power is found only in people, and when you go to work, you rent out your labour power for the day. But your ability to work, your labour power, doesn't just grow on trees. It takes a certain amount of food and shelter and clothing and so on to sustain your labour power from 9 to 5. Now, all of those things have value that can be measured in labour time as well. So let's assume that it takes, say, 4 hours of labour to produce everything you need to work for one day. You go to work at 9 a.m. and by 1 p.m., 4 hours later, you have paid for yourself for that day. The amount of labour going into you is the same as the amount of labour coming out of you. But you don't go home at 1 p.m. You have to stay the rest of the day. So your boss gets 4 hours labour out of you, during which time you are generating what Marx called surplus value. Value on top of the value it took to get you there. Profit, essentially. But because the means of production are privately owned, anything you make belongs to your boss or to your company, and they sell the products you make for profit and keep that profit. The surplus value goes not to you, but to them.
That seems correct. Again, maybe I'm missing something subtle here, but I would say that that's like a totally fine explanation of what Marx is saying, at least in that respect. That it's that the reproduction of your labor power and of yourself is less than the amount of value produced by your labor power, um, or what by your labor rather. So I think that's a fine explanation. So I'll give her credit on that one. That seems correct.
And that right there, in a nutshell, is why Marx thought.
Uh, yeah, kinda. She basically said she didn't call it socially necessary labor time, but she called it. She said like average conditions of the laboring thing. So like if you work twice as hard, you don't have the value of the if you work twice as hard and you produce twice the amount of products, you don't have the value of everything, right? That she did say that. Um, but again, if you look back, it's not definitely not a perfect thing. Um, but yeah, I'm just giving her credit on this one specifically. I don't think this is wrong. This seems fine as an explanation.
Capitalism was unavoidably exploitative. Even if you're making a great wage and you're happy with your job, under capitalism he thought you are always being paid less than what your labor is actually worth. That's how capitalism works.
Um, you're being paid less than the value generated by your labor power. Um, but you're not being paid less than your labor is worth. Like definitionally, your labor is worth whatever it is that they paid for it. Um, it's just that what your labor does is create more value. So it is exploitative in no matter like how much you're making, but it's not a you're not being defrauded, It's not that you're being underpaid for what your labor is worth or what your labor power is worth rather, because it is what your labor power is worth just by definition. Ah shit, this is a 50-50, no matter what. So there we go, sure.
Hire other people to increase the value actually worth. That's how capitalism works. You hire other people to increase the value of what you have, and then you keep that extra value for yourself. Marx thought that capitalism and everything that has come with it is sustained only by exploiting the working class.
Sure, but keep in mind that it's not necessarily normative the way that or it's not necessarily like as laden of a term when he uses it.
But hang on a minute, what was that about class? How can you take everybody who's working in very different jobs and lump them all together into one group called the working class? Well, the idea that society is
Well, you don't, because you don't say the working class, you say the proletariat.
made up of groups, which we call classes, that struggle with each other, is called conflict theory. And it
Ugh. Uh, I hate this term. I hate this term because it's not. I hate this term so much. Conflict theory is like that. It's just too broad, man. It's just too broad. This is taken from sociology, like 101 shit, and it's just like I don't know. I have gripes with the idea of like conflict theory as like a unified project because like there are so many different uh versions, and and conflict theory doesn't necessarily need to be about classes either. Like if you have I don't know if anybody here knows who George Simmel is, but he has like a very, very rich theory of conflict and of competition that, um, it's between groups, but it's not necessarily between classes. That's I guess that's fair, but it's like I don't love I don't so first of all, I'm trying to talk about Marx here, right? Not about uh people who come after Marx. I definitely agree that like especially early Marx is it's very strange with respect to his treatment of the peasantry. I don't want to discount that. But it's like I guess what I dislike because I dislike the term because you can be working class or being you can be part of the working class while also being part of the bourgeois, right? Like small business owners are an example of this. Small business owners are bourgeois, but they are also usually working class. And not just in the sense that of the amount of money they make, but also in the sense that they actually work. Like a lot of mom and pop shops, like the owner of the store will run the register or restock the shelves or whatever else, right? Um, it's so they are part of the working classes because they are working, you know. It's just that they're not their class interest is still uh not necessarily in line with the proletariat. So that's why it's I think a problematic term.
It doesn't mean that everybody within the same class has exactly the same experience. It just means that we can model society as being made up of those groups. A little bit like in meteorology.
Um I okay. I'm a little suspicious of the term, modeling it as if uh what is it? What did she say
When we look at
specifically?
society as being exactly the same experience, it just means that we can model society as being made up of those groups.
Yeah. So this is what I mean. This is what I mean is that it's this is a very her interpretation of Marx is super like uh it's very much like influenced by I guess like analytic philosophy and how it's not saying like I don't know. It's not just a model. You're not just modeling society this way for Marx. There's something deeper to it than that. Like the class conflict stems from the underlying social relations that actually exist. They're not. It's not just like a useful model of the economy. Um, he wants to say that like he's giving like a causal explanation here about how the relationships that underlie it lead to this. It's not like how do I explain this? Like the language of modeling is just I think not fit for purpose in Marx. It's not just a model of the way things work. It's like he's proposing that it is like actually underlying the social relations that we have with one another. Also, I think this one is unsalvageable. Right? Because this is one has to be here. And then oh wait, well these can be safe, yes. So that means that, and then that, and then that, and then that. Hey, there we go. So there was only 150/50 in this one. Yeah. Anyway, let's continue.
A little bit like in meteorology. When we look at a weather front, we know that not every molecule of air has the same temperature and moves in the same direction, but we can observe trends in groups of them and model those trends. Marx thought that we could model class conflict so accurately we could even predict the future with it. He thought that society would follow an inevitable progress towards communism.
Uh, Early Marx, not later Marx.
As the relations of the working classes to the means of production changed. This is called historical materialism, and as we'll be seeing later in the
Shit.
series,
I
he
don't know why
may
I
have
did
been a
that.
little hasty there.
It, okay, it's not historical materialism is way more broad than that. It's a theory of history as a whole. It's not necessarily about inevitability either. Like I would argue the early Marx you could construe as stagist in that way, but the later Marx is I think more thoughtful. Um and it's certainly not just it's not the working classes versus the let me re, like rewind and see how she
As the
describes it.
relations of the society would follow an inevitable progress towards communism, as the relations of the working classes to the means of production changed. This is called historical materialism.
Yeah, so no. The issue is that this is too specific. The the march towards communism out of capitalism is one part of the historical meta narrative, but it's not the whole thing, right? Because there isn't a working class or a proletariat uh, before capitalism. So it's one part of historical materialism. It is not exhaustive of it.
And as we'll be seeing later in the series, he may have been a little hasty there. But
I mean, as he himself acknowledged later.
it's not just the working class who get a raw deal, Marx thought. Remember earlier on we said capitalism is when the means of production are privately owned? So how do capitalists get to own them? You've got to have money in order to buy somebody else's labour. You've got to have money to make money. So how does capitalism get started? Marx's answer is that it's usually violence. He lived in 19th century England, where a lot of capital and property was either being violently confiscated from foreigners, there's the link between capitalism and imperialism, or inherited from people who, at some point in history, got their wealth through feudalism or conquest.
Well, okay, hold on. It wasn't just from foreigners though. It was also from the peasantry who were not foreigners. But I'll 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 accept that. That seems like a misstatement. I doubt she would disagree with what I'm saying.
Even if people invent totally new inventions, as during the Industrial Revolution they did, the conditions that allow them to do that often come about through that violence. This leads us to a consideration of capitalism's consequences, which will be part 2 in the series. That's the end of part 1. You've learned about Marx's labour theory of value and the different relations of classes to the means of production. In part 2, we'll be looking at...
Okay. Just give me a second. We're gonna move on to part 2. I give that video a C minus. um, because it contains some accurate information about Marx. I think the span that explains why it is that labor is the sole source of new value, I think is correct. I think that part of the video is good, but I don't think that the rest of it is very good. I especially don't like the first part because I think it's not, you know, there's a reason that Marx in Capital starts with like toy examples, you know, like toy examples in the sense that they don't really map on to any real situation of production, you know, like he assumes in Capital through a lot of it that just that price and value are the same because he wants to start with simpler examples before he starts doing the more complicated analysis, right? So, and I don't think that her initial example of like the production of a YouTube video is really fit for the purpose that she's using it. It's a way more complex example than than is fit for an introductory explainer for Marx. Um, she also didn't really touch on commodity fetishism at all, which is really important, right? Because it's the it's especially like the gateway into a lot of later philosophy around Marx. the falling back on production that capital does, right? Anyway, let's go to the next one. Capitalism's consequences.
You know Harbor Freight for affordability, but durability goes right along with it. You see,
Thought I had out.
March is my month of Marx. In part 1, we learned about labour and class conflict. In this part 2, we'll be looking at capitalism's consequences vis-à-vis alienation. As well as being a generally bad time for anybody who worked in a factory, the other thing Victorian England was famous for was machines, automation, and this is going to become very important later in the series. Remember, Marx thought that value comes from labour. A machine, then, for Marx, is like a lump of value because it takes labour to build one. As the machine functions and wears down, it transfers some of its value to the products it makes. But only labour power can actually generate new value. Machines just store value and then distribute it really quickly. That's why although automation can increase productivity, the products themselves contain less and less labour and therefore are worth less and less. So in the long run, automation should cause profits to fall. Marx thought, anyway, like the...
Well, not absolute profits, but the rate of profit. The rate of profit, he said, would fall. But only it's not a secular decline. That meaning like inextricable, right? Because the point was that this was a way of accounting for like cycles in the market. Basically that it's not that capitalism can't sustain itself in the long run. It's just that it needs to do so through crisis and the destruction of constant capital in order to reinvigorate value.
The labour theory of value, the tendency of the rate of profit to fall is pretty controversial. Part of the reason it's controversial is that capitalism does have safety measures against falling profits, most of which try to drive a wedge between the product's value and the price that you sell it for. So for instance, marking up the price so that it doesn't reflect how much labour it actually took to make the product. Or you could cut wages, or you could outsource to a foreign country to reduce labour costs. Also, see monopolies or price fixing. And when those safety measures fail, profits fall too low and you get an economic crisis. Marx thought that crises were inevitable under capitalism. They were actually built into the system. He also thought that eventually the safety measures would fail permanently and capitalism would collapse into socialism. More on that in part 4.
Early Marx, not later Marx.
The common theme of Marx's objections to capitalism is that it has no built-in brakes. Under capitalism, humans won't ever reach a point at which we hardly need to work anymore because most of the jobs are done by machines. Because if nobody's labouring, nobody's generating any profits. And if certain capitalist industries are destroying the environment or killing the workers, well then as long as they're profitable, ain't no brakes on the capitalism train. The system would have to be changed from outside, like the Victorian factory conditions, which were improved, but not by anything within capitalism, by government legislation. That's what...
Oh, no. Government legislation is part of capitalism, my friend. The state, no. This is a huge misinterpretation of Marx here. Government legislation is not necessarily anti-capitalist, because to Marx, the state, i.e., the thing that makes government legislation, has a class character, and thus what the state is under capitalism is an instrument of class oppression, specifically class oppression of the bourgeois over the proletariat. So legislation that limits capitalism is not necessarily anti-capitalist, and it's not from outside of capitalism. There is no outside capitalism for it once you have capitalism. Capitalism like subsumes everything under it. and Marx touches on this, but so have a lot of other theorists, like Karl Polanyi, for example. The idea of like the market logic subsuming all other things, and also the idea that restrictions on the market logic are an important part of the success of it, because if there were no safety measures, then capitalism would just destroy the world. So it's only through these counter movements that capitalism is able to sustain itself at all.
Why Marx put so much importance on a revolution of the working class. He thought it would be an outside shock to a system that couldn't change on its own.
No. Okay, hold on. So here's first of all, I'm gonna I think this one is unsolvable. I think we're just stuck with a 50-50 on this one. Um I just want to see. I guess this here is like the best chance of giving me something. Yeah, that wasn't happening. Anyway, so no, it's not necessarily from the outside. The proletariat are imminent to capitalism. So it's not it's not it's not an outside shock necessarily, as much as it is like an inside shock. Like as she even says earlier in the video, that the crises within capitalism will eventually permanently fail. That means that it's internal to capitalism. It's not outside it.
As we'll be seeing later in the series, he may have underestimated capitalism's ability to adapt. But
Maybe early Marx said, not later Marx.
whether profits really do fall, or whether the safety measures are enough to keep them bumped up, Marx thought that the Industrial Revolution should have meant people being set free, because you don't need to work as much anymore when you've got machines to do the jobs for you. But because those machines were being used to maximise profit rather than reduce labour, people were actually working harder than ever.
Should have. I don't know about should have. It depends on if you mean like a normative should, or if you mean like a descriptive should. Because I definitely do think like, maybe contrary to what I've been saying earlier, but I do think Marx has normativity built into his system, though I don't know that it's necessarily moral in the same way that we would construe today. But it's not again, so it really depends on what should you're talking about here.
Marx thought that under capitalism, the potential of automation gets wasted, and instead of liberation, we get alienation.
Okay. Let's see.
Alienation refers both to a socio-economic/political state of living, but also potentially a psychological state of unfulfillment. The Encyclopedia of Marxism calls it the process whereby people become foreign to the world they are living in. Remember last time the importance Marx placed on labour? Human labour is very important for him because we do it consciously. We plan it out beforehand, and the products we make are the reification of a state of mind.
Uh, hold on, hold on, hold on. That doesn't seem right at all. No. Okay. Reification. Okay. I will concede. I will concede that it's possible that I'm missing something. All right. But to my understanding of reification, it's not just the idea, it's not turning your plans into concrete labor, into a product. Like, hold on, let me re-listen just to make sure I understand.
Human products we make because we do it based on labour. Human labour is very important for him because we do it consciously. We plan it out beforehand, and the products we make are the reification of a state of mind.
I do not think that no, that is not what reification means in Marx. Reification in Marxist terms is the concretization of the of the social relations that underlie capitalism. When you say you reify, um, yeah, it's not like it's not a neutral process like here. Like so like commodity fetishism is a kind of reification, right? He's talking about how value in the abstract becomes embodied, and thus we perceive it as a feature of the product or of the commodity, when it is actually a feature of the social relations between people and that underlie the creation of the commodity, right? So that's what it means by like that's what reification is. It's not when you turn your plans into labor into excuse me, into a product. That's not reification in Marxism. And maybe there's another maybe there's another like definition that I'm trying to look like on a different monitor to try to figure out if there's anything else that it could be, or like where she's getting this from. Like where is she getting this from? Okay. Is it maybe from this? Yeah. All right. So thanks, Sardonicus. Good luck. Yeah. So even this source, right? So I'm looking for reification in this source. Uh, this source by Julie Cox, or Judy Cox rather, not Julie. So it says, actually, let me just bring it up. Are you able to see that? Not super well. Let me get rid of Minesweeper real quick. Oh shit! It's a fucking justified thing. But yeah, even if you look at this source, right? So reification. Marx described the whole process of reification of human relationships, the attribution of human powers to inanimate objects, and the way in which social organization appears as independent of human will as commodity fetishism. So no, it's not. Reification is not like turning something from your mind into a concrete object. It's like it's precisely not that. It's like the illusion of having something in a concrete object when it is actually a social relationship or a relationship between people and not an inherent property. So this is very wrong. I would say that this is actually the most wrong thing in the video, in either video so far, and it's belied by her own sources. So I'm confused on how she made this mistake.
Human labour for Marx is an expression of what makes us special, that rational and creative impulse to take what nature gives us and build on it. Marx didn't think that there's such a thing as a fixed human nature, independent of our socio-historical circumstances, but he did observe that the desire to labour cooperatively is common to all human societies. He called this our Gattungswesen, or species essence, and he thought that
Mm, it wouldn't. Are we sure it's not species being? Are we sure? I mean, admittedly, I could be wrong, but I was under the impression that it was species being and not species essence. Yeah, this is. I don't know where is she getting species essence from? Because that is the word that is species being though. Like I'm really confused on this because I would have like I'm trying to. I'm how did she get species essence out of that? It's not that big of a deal even. Like I don't really care what you call it, but I also don't know that that's quite correct. Like I don't know that like the cooperative. Okay, I'm not gonna. Hold on. So does this one talk about species being? Yeah. So this in her own source, I'm again using her own source here. So it says, the species nature of animal is an eternal is an eternal repetition. That of man is transformation, development, and change. I don't even necessarily agree with that, but sure. Um, yeah. So it's capacity.
independent of our socio-historical circumstances, but he did observe that the desire to labour cooperatively is common to all human societies. He called this our Gattungswesen, or species essence, and he thought that under capitalism that species essence gets corrupted and turned against us through the
Mm,
processes he called
mm. No, hold on. No, 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 no. It's not about corruption. It's not a corruption. Our ability to 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 enter into relationships with one another and to recognize ourselves in relation to a totality is what allows capitalism to exist at all. Like eh, like why don't animals have capitalism? Right? It's not a corruption of species being. It's I would say that he doesn't think it's like desirable, like capitalism, but I don't think I don't think he would say it's a corruption. Like I'm trying to see if she's getting this from one of her sources, and I just don't see where she's getting it from.
alienation. Marx identified four kinds of alienation that arise under capitalism. The first is the alienation of labourers from the products they make. This occurs when labourers make products that don't fully belong to them. So, for instance, you might work in a clothing factory but be unable to afford to wear any of the nice designer clothing that you're making.
Uh, no, hold on. No, it's literally about the ownership. It's not about the ability to afford it. No. No, that's wrong. That's just completely wrong. Whether or not your wage can afford the things that you're making is irrelevant. Your wage could afford it, and you would still be alienated from it because you don't own it. You don't have control over what happens to it. I'm gonna actually pull up the Paris manuscripts. They're just like a full PDF. Yeah. Yeah. So let's look at the manuscripts, right? Um I go to page 29. So So much does labor's realization appear as loss of realization that the worker loses realization to the point of starving to death. So much does objectification appear as loss of the object that the worker is robbed of the objects most necessary not only for his life but for his work. Indeed, labor itself becomes an object which he can obtain only with the greatest effort and with the most irregular interruptions. So what he's talking about here is like the necessity of reproducing one's self, right? So when it's alienation, so this is the alienation from labor itself. The labor that you undertake becomes an object and not an extension of yourself. It's something that you need to maintain as if it were an object. Uh, So much does the appropriation of the object appear as estrangement that the more objects the worker produces, the less he can possess, and the more he falls under the sway of his product, capital. All these consequences are implied in the statement that the worker is related to the product of his labor as to an alien object. For on this premise, it is clear the more the worker spends himself, the more powerful becomes the alien world of objects which he creates over and against himself. The poorer he himself, his inner world, becomes, the less belongs to him as his own. It is the same in religion. The more man puts into God, the less he retains in himself. The worker puts his life into the object, but now his life no longer belongs to him, but to the object. Hence, the greater this activity, the more the worker lacks objects. Whatever the product of his labor is, he is not. Therefore, the greater this product, the less is he himself. The alienation of the worker in his product means that not only that his labor becomes an object, an external existence, but that it exists outside of him independently as something alien to him, and that it becomes a power on its own confronting him. This is really important. This is especially what later philosophers pick up, right? This here is reification, you know, that it becomes a power on its own confronting him. The idea of the labor taking on the form of the object and then the object taking on powers to itself. Um It means that the life which he has conferred on the object confronts him as something hostile and alien. So reading that.
This occurs because labourers are paid less than the value of what they make.
No, it's not. It does not occur because of that. It occurs because they do not own what they make. It's not about being paid less than the value of what they make. They could be paid the same value as what they make and they would still not own it.
As we said last time, the surplus value is channeled away from them and passed on up to the capitalists. The second type is the alienation of labourers from the act of labouring. This occurs when labourers are coerced or forced or not working on their own terms. They're not working because working is the expression of some need, but because it's a means to getting what they need through attaining wages. It also occurs when they can't decide how the product is sold or applied.
Okay, this is like half correct.
Are coerced or forced labourers from the act of labouring. This occurs when labourers are coerced or forced or not working on their own terms.
So it's only that last one. It doesn't necessarily occur when they're coerced or forced, because there isn't labor under capitalism is formally free. That's what makes it capitalism. It allows for the flow of labor power from one industry to another. That's why you have like that is what capitalism does, right? So it's not necessarily about coercion.
They're not working because working is the expression of some need, but because it's a means to getting what they need through attaining wages.
So that part I think does line up with what we read just now, right? The idea that one is that labor becomes alien to themselves through them treating it as an object to which they have to maintain for them to be able to live. So I think that's correct, though I think that you could definitely explain that way better.
It also occurs when they can't decide how the product is sold or applied. So for instance, if you have to work a job that you don't like, making money for somebody else, or starve, Marx thought what you're experiencing there is alienation from the act of labouring. The third, Marx thought what a job that you don't like, making money for applied. So for instance, if you have to work a job that you don't like, making money for somebody else, or starve, Marx thought what you're experiencing there is alienation from the act of labouring.
Not quite. Not quite. So that is what leads to the alienation from your labor, but it is not the experience itself.
The third is alienation of labourers from other labourers. Marx thought that under capitalism, labourers would be encouraged to seek what benefits them individually, wages, rather than what benefits them mutually, which might be much larger social change. Hence the famous slogan, "Workers of the world unite." One Western example of this might be the way that some sectors of the white working class have historically viewed working class immigrants not as people in the same boat as them struggling to make ends meet, possible allies in a fight for social change, but as competition for employment, which is what capitalism makes them. The fourth...
Okay. So the problem is that that would be false consciousness. Like I'm trying to figure out like where specifically there's like 4 types. Yeah. So I can't. The issue is that I don't know where specifically she's getting this from, because like the four types of alienation thing is slightly different. Yeah, so he's covering that as the third type. Hold on. Yeah, so this is what she seems to be describing here is false consciousness. Because the issue is that like the whole theory of Marx's revolution is precisely the opposite of this. That there actually would in fact be um that there wouldn't be this kind of that by interacting with one another um on the like as laborers, that there could become that there would be the potential for class consciousness among the oppressed. That was like the whole point. So what she's describing here seems to be more like false consciousness than it does anything else, which is why I'm confused.
Kind is the alienation of labourers from their Gattungswesen, their species essence, and this goes back to what Marx thought human labour was for. Under capitalism, you work to generate profit for somebody else, or you starve, rather than work to generate surplus value for yourself. You do discrete, separate jobs, rather than work on what you want to, because that's the way profits are more easily generated. You do this for hours not set by you and for most of the time that makes up your life, rather than direct your life the way you want it to go. You produce value, but you're prevented from sharing in it. Marx thought that just wasn't what a good human life is. But isn't all of Marx's whine?
Okay, so I'm gonna so we have still a third aspect of estranged labor to deduce from the two already considered. So interesting that she reversed the order of these. If this is the third one, she presented this as the fourth one, right? So that's a little strange. Man is a species being, not only because in practice and in theory he adopts the species, his own as well as those of others, as his object, but, and this is the only another way of expressing it, also because he treats himself as the actual living species, because he treats himself as a universal and therefore a free being. The life of the species, both in man and in animal, consists physically in the fact that man, like the animal, lives on organic nature. Excuse me. And the more universal man or the animal is, the more universal is the sphere of inorganic nature on which he lives. Just as plants, animals, stones, air, light, etc., constitute theoretically a part of human consciousness, partly as objects of natural science, partly as objects of art, his spiritual inorganic nature, spiritual nourishment, which he must first prepare to make palatable and digestible, so also in the realm of practice, they constitute a part of human life and human activity. Physically, man lives only on these products of nature, whether they appear in the form of food, heating, clothing, a dwelling, etc. The universality of man appears in practice precisely in the universality which makes all nature his inorganic body, both inasmuch as nature is, one, his direct means of life, and two, the material, the object, and the instrument of his life activity. Nature is man's inorganic body. Nature, that is, insofar as it is not itself human body. Not itself a human body? I don't know. Man lives on nature means that nature is his body. That this is a little confusingly written. Man lives on nature means that nature is his body, with which he must remain in continuous interchange if he is not to die. That man's physical and spiritual life is linked to nature means simply that nature is linked to itself, for man is a part of nature. In estranging from man, one, nature, and two, himself, his own active functions, his life activity, estranged labor, estranges the species from man. It changes from him the life of the species into a means of individual life. First, it estranges the life of the species and individual life, and secondly, it makes the individual life in its abstract form the purpose of the life of the species, likewise in its abstract and estranged form. For labor, life activity, productive life itself, appears to man in the first place merely as a means of satisfying a need, the need to maintain physical existence. Yet the productive life is the life of the species. It is life engendering life. The whole character of a species, its species character, is contained in the character of its life activity, and free conscious activity is man's species character. Life itself appears only as a means to life. So let's having read that, let's re-listen to what she says.
Makes them. The fourth kind is the alienation of labourers from their Gattungswesen, their species essence, and this goes back to what Marx thought human labour was for. Under capitalism, you work to generate profit for somebody else, or you starve, rather than work to generate surplus value for yourself. You do discrete, separate jobs, rather than...
No, wait, whoa. Okay, hold on, that was...
You work to generate profit for somebody else, or you starve, rather than work to generate surplus value for yourself.
Hold the phone, man. Hold the phone. That's just... It's not rather than generating surplus value for yourself. Because surplus value is a consequence of the relation of capital. Value doesn't exist in like a metaphysical sense. Like your species essence isn't to generate surplus value for yourself. It's not to generate value at all. In the like as we were just reading, like it's like labor as a life activity is life itself, but it's then taken to be the means of sustaining bare life, or the like mere physical existence, right? Like that's what's happening here. It's not about whether who gets the surplus value. Oh, that's really bad. That's really bad. That's really wrong. That is really wrong. I didn't catch that before. Let me listen one more time to make sure I understand.
Is what capitalism makes them. The fourth kind is the alienation of labourers from their Gattungswesen, their species essence, and this goes back to what Marx thought human labour was for. Under capitalism, you work to generate profit for somebody else, or you starve, rather than work to generate surplus value for yourself.
Yeah, that's just wrong. It's not rather than generating it for yourself. The issue is surplus value. The issue is value, the value form.
You do discrete, separate jobs rather than work on what you want to, because that's the way profits are more easily generated. You do this for hours not set by you and for most of the time that makes up your life, rather than direct your life the way you want it to go. You produce value, but you're prevented from sharing in it.
So this is part of the confusion though, because in saying you don't direct your own you don't direct your own labor, you're separating the labor from the laborer. Like you are buying into the alienation here. Like the whole point is that I can go back to reading it, right? So it is the animal is immediately one with its life activity. It does not distinguish itself from it. It is its life activity. Man makes his life activity itself the object of his will and his consciousness. He has conscious life activity. It is not a determination with which he directly merges. Conscious life activity distinguishes man immediately from animal activity. It is just because of that that he is a species being, or is only because he is a species being that he is a conscious being. Okay, wait, hold on. Okay, so okay, no. Okay. I think I'm okay, I did say something wrong there. I did say something wrong there actually. Um yeah. Yeah. Conscious life activity distinguishes man immediately from animal life activity. It is because of this that he is a species being, or it is only because he is a species being that he is a conscious being, i.e., that his own life is an object for him. Only because of that is his activity free activity. Estranged labor reverses the relationship so that just because the man is a conscious being, that he makes his life activity, his essential being, a mere means to his existence. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Okay. So the surplus value thing is definitely incorrect. Let me
Or you starve rather than work to generate surplus value for yourself. If what Marx thought human labour was for, under capitalism, generate surplus value for yourself. You do discrete, separate jobs rather than work on what you want to, because that's the way profits are more easily generated. You do this for hours not set by you and for most of the time that makes up your life, rather than direct your life the way you want it to go. You produce value, but you're prevented from sharing in it. Marx thought that just wasn't what a good human life is. But
okay. So this is I think I would need to so the surplus value thing is definitely wrong. As for like the rest of it, I would need to look into it a little more, but preliminarily, I think that it is wrong basically to treat it about like the control over your life activity in this way. Because like let me read this again. Yeah, so right. Let me again. I'm going to reread this again just to make sure. so also in the realm of practice they constitute a part of human life and human activity. Physically, man lives only on these products of nature, whether they appear in the form of food, heating, clothing, a dwelling, etc. The universality of man appears in practice precisely in the universality which makes all nature his inorganic body, both inasmuch as nature is one, his direct means of life, and two, the material, the object, and the instrument of his life activity. Nature is man's inorganic body. Nature, that is, insofar as it is not itself human body. Man lives on nature, means that nature is his body, which with which he must remain in continuous interchange if he is not to die. That man's physical and spiritual life is linked to nature means simply that nature is linked to itself, for man is a part of nature. In estranging from man, one, nature, and two, himself, his own active functions, his life activity, estranged labor estranges the species from man. It changes for him the life of the species into a means of individual life. First, it estranges the life of the species and individual life, and secondly, it makes individual life in its abstract form the purpose of the life of the species, likewise in its abstract and estranged form. For labor, life activity, productive life itself appears to man in the first place merely as a means of satisfying a need, the need to maintain physical existence. Yet the productive life is the life of the species. It is the life engendering life. The whole character of a species, its species character, is contained in the character of its life activity, and free, conscious activity is man's species character. Life itself appears only as a means of life. The animal is immediately one with its life activity. It does not distinguish itself from it. It is its life activity. Man makes his life activity itself the object of his will and of his consciousness. He has conscious life activity. It is not a determination with which he directly merges. Okay. So that part is important, I think. Um, that for animals they are synonymous with their life activity, but for man they're not. That man can make it an object of his will, that he can like consider it. So that's what the self-conscious part is about here. So it is because of this that he is a species being, or it is only because he is a species being that he is a conscious being, i.e., that his own life is an object for him. Only because of that is his activity free activity. Estranged labor reverses the relationship so that it is just because a man is a conscious being that he makes his life activity, his essential being, a mere means to his existence. In creating a world of objects by his personal activity, in his work upon inorganic nature, man proves himself a conscious being, i.e., as a being that treats the species as his own essential being, or that treats itself as a species being. Yeah. Admittedly, animals also produce. They build themselves nests, dwellings, like the bees, beavers, ants, etc. But an animal only produces what it immediately needs for itself or its young. It produces one-sidedly, whilst man produces universally. It produces only under the dominion of immediate physical needs, whilst man produces even when he is free from physical need and only truly produces in freedom therefrom. An animal produces only itself, whilst man reproduces the whole of nature. An animal's product belongs immediately to its physical body, whilst man freely confronts his product. An animal forms only in accordance with the standard and the need of the species to which it belongs, whilst man knows how to produce in accordance with the standards of every species, and knows how to apply everywhere the inherent standard to the object. Man, therefore, also forms objects in accordance with the laws of beauty. It is It is just in his work upon the objective world, therefore, that man really proves himself to be a species being. His production is his activity, is his active species life. Through this production, nature appears as his work and his reality. The object of nature is, therefore, the objectification of man's species life. For he duplicates himself not only as in consciousness intellectually, but also actively in reality, and therefore he sees himself in a world that he has created. In tearing away from man the object of his production, therefore, estranged labor tears from him his species life, his real objectivity as a member of the species, and transforms his advantage over animals into the disadvantage that his inorganic body, nature, is taken from him. Okay. So I don't think it's as wrong as I initially thought. But the surplus value thing is just completely wrong. It's not about producing surplus value for yourself. It is specifically about the production the production of life itself, of the species being, of your own life, and not merely your physical existence.
Isn't all of Marx's whining about the evils of capitalism just misguided? I mean, it's not like under feudalism everybody was happy and nobody worked. You still had to work or starve then, and even if we automated as many jobs as we could, there are some jobs that are still going to have to be done by people. Well, we're going to touch on a few of those questions in part 4, Beyond Capitalism. That's the end of part 2. You've learned about capitalism's problems, including...
Okay. All right, I think I'm going to go now. I think this video was significantly worse than the last one, though. I would probably give it like a D or D minus, probably. Yeah. There's a lot more problems with this one, and there wasn't like an uninterrupted span of like correct information for me to grasp onto. So sorry, Ultima X4. You're gonna have to you're just gonna have to rewatch the stream, I guess. I'm sorry. Um should be available as a VOD once I'm done, but yeah. Anyway, maybe we'll continue this another time, maybe not.